What's up, tribe? Nick here in Ottawa, and in this awareness video I want to talk about calf tension. So tight calves are an issue that a lot of people are facing. It's something that I used to see all the time in clinic, and it shows up in a couple different ways, right? It can show up as tight ankles. So if you got restricted ankle mobility, you can't get your knee over your toe, and that's restricting some of your movements like your squat. That's one way calf tightness shows up. Another way it shows up is calf strains. So if you got chronically tight calves that are just rock hard and you continually strain your calf, so get these kind of small muscle tears that develop that you then have to recover from, that's another way they show up. Another way they show up, that calf tension shows up, is Achilles pain. So your Achilles tendon, if it's really painful and sore or irritated, that is a factor of excessive calf tension. So calf tightness appears in all those ways. And I think one important thing to start with when we talk about calf tightness is that it's always there for a reason, right? Your body is keeping your calf engaged and turned on a lot more frequently than it should for a reason, right? It's trying to solve a problem by keeping the calf turned on. And until you address and solve the problem that your body's trying to solve, you're not really gonna permanently and sustainably address the calf tension, okay? So massaging your calf, getting in there, resetting the tissue with some self-massage can be helpful, but it doesn't solve the problem. So that needs to be incorporated as a tool that can be implemented to control the calf tension and help reset it so you can reprogram how your body uses it, but you also have to solve the problem. Now, there's three big causes that I used to see in clinic and that I've seen, even in my own personal experience, that can create or contribute to calf tension. Right? Because there's a lot of different variables that can contribute, and different variables will be more important or bigger contributors for different people, right? Everyone's a bit different, but I used to see this pattern of three kind of focal things. Number one, if you wear shoes that have a positive heel, so if you wear shoes where the heel is higher than the forefoot, puts you on an angle, you're automatically putting your Achilles tendon and your calf muscle in a shortened position. And that can give problems. You're also limiting the ability of the foot to do what it's supposed to, because the foot needs to contribute to your stability. If your foot's not able to splay and your toes can't be used to generate a stability response because they're being squished into a shoe, then your calf is gonna have to stabilize and make up for what the foot can't. So having a stiff, weak foot or a foot that's squished in shoes, plus having an elevated heel is kind of a double whammy. So going to flat shoes, natural footwear that's nice and flexible, allows your toes to splay, that's a really powerful way to solve that first one. Another reason people's calves get tight is if we look upstream and someone can't extend their hip. They can't access their glutes as a propulsion muscle if they can't even get into hip extension. So if we spend a lot of time sitting in a chair where our hips are bent and flexed up to 90 degrees, we're essentially teaching our brains to get stronger and more stable in the hip flexion position, but we're gradually losing the ability to actually extend our hips, which is something that you need in order to walk, to run, to produce power and propulsion in a forward direction. So if you can't extend your hip, or if your hips are stiff, stuck in a flexed position from a lot of times spent sitting, then instead of your brain being able to use your glutes to propel you forward for propulsion, it has to use the calf to do way more work than it's designed to do. So if you can't extend your hip, if you can't use your glutes to propel you forward, your calf immediately starts to take on that workload, and that can contribute to long-term tension. Okay? A third issue that I used to always see, if someone's hip is not stable, if you can't stabilize your hip joint, right? Same thing, if we spend a lot of time sitting in chairs, we're not plugging in and training all the deep hip stabilizers to do what they're supposed to keep our hip stable. And the hip bone is connected to the leg bone. So if your hip is not stable, then your foot, your ankle, and your knee are all gonna be at risk. And the way that your brain solves that problem is it starts to engage a lot of the lower leg muscles to fill the void, right? If your hip can't stabilize with the deep glute muscles, then your calf essentially gets turned on 24/7 to act as a stabilizer to protect the ankle. So you can release that muscle all you want, but until you fix the hip stability problem, it's not gonna go away. Ways that you can work on your hip stability: do unilateral training where you're training more on one leg. A beam practice is a really powerful way to re-engage those deep hip stabilizers. And so working on your hip stability is a really powerful solution to calf tightness, because a lot of people have tight calves because they're doing the work of the hip stabilizers. Okay, so those are sort of three causes, and we're gonna We've got a bunch of tools videos in Beam Tribe that address, how to work on your hip stability, how to work on your hip extension, right? How to work on mobilizing your foot so that it can play a bigger role in the stabilization of your body. So hopefully that demystifies a little bit of not just dealing with calf tension, because we didn't really talk a whole lot about the tools that we need to deal with it, but an awareness of what causes our calves to get tight is a really powerful thing to understand. You need that understanding in order to address the root cause. Okay, so hopefully that helps demystify a little bit of why our calves get tight and gives you a clear path to follow when you're trying to troubleshoot that issue. Okay, thanks for listening. We'll catch you in the next video.